Is the US part of this war or not? Since Israel fired the first strikes on Friday, we've had mixed messages out of the White House. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was quick to stress the US was not involved in strikes against Iran. That's to quote. Just a day later, US President Donald Trump said he knew about the attacks, but had called on Israel not to attack Iran until nuclear talks had concluded. But new reporting from Middle East Eye has revealed the Trump administration did, in fact, play a vital role in arming and resupplying Israel's war effort, even while the president was still negotiating with Tehran. 2 days before Israel launched its surprise attack, the US quietly sent hundreds of laser-guided Hellfire missiles to its ally. The CIA was briefed as early as April about Israel's attack plan, which reportedly impressed the Trump administration. And key to Israel's mission on Friday, the US helped modify their F-35 fighter jets to fly longer distances without refueling. This allowed Israel to penetrate targets deep within Iranian territory on Friday. Here to bring us the story is MEE's political reporter, Sean Matthews. Welcome to the show, Sean. Your investigation suggests...
Thanks for having me on.
Your investigation suggests that the US could have been deeply involved in preparations for the attack on Iran that we saw last Friday. How much did the US know, and how much did they help?
Yeah, I mean, look, as you said, we reported that the U.S. was briefed on Israel's battle plans in Iran throughout April and May. So the U.S. clearly knew what Israel's plans were, the precision strikes they had in mind. They knew the target systems analysis that Israel had laid out to hit kind of the systems that surround Iranian nuclear sites, like the energy grid, water supplies, all of these things, air defense systems. So I think there's very little doubt that the U.S. knew about Israel's battle plans. And of course, the U.S. has been supplying Israel with a steady stream of weapons really since the beginning of 7 October, right, 2023. The Hellfire shipment that you mentioned, I thought that was interesting because the story that we got on that was that the U.S. sent those Hellfire missiles to Israel on Tuesday, but that didn't become knowledgeable within wider circles of the administration and U.S. government until Friday. So again, I'm not sure what role the Hellfires directly played in the Israeli attack because these laser-guided weapons are more for precision strikes. But clearly the U.S. was kind of trying to keep it quiet that it was beefing up Israel's military supplies before the attack. Of course, because the U.S. was going to engage in direct negotiations with Iran on Sunday, right? They were supposed to. So there was a steady stream of, U.S. weapons going to Israel as these talks were progressing and as Israel was preparing for the battle plans. The F-35 modifications that you discussed, I think this is the most interesting, and this is what everyone's going to be talking about, I think, in the months and even the years after this conflict. The F-35 is the United States advanced stealth warplane. And it's probably one of the best aircraft there is for fighter jets. But it has one limitation, and that limitation is its range. The F-35's combat range, which means the distance that it can go from the base to the targets that it strikes and back, is about 600 miles, a straight shot, 700 miles. The distance between Israel and Iran at its shortest point is about 1,100 miles one way. So basically, the Israelis have always faced this dilemma with their warplanes, which is that they have to get them from Israel into Iran, and you can do that through really 2 ways. You refuel them midair, or you find a way to get them to go farther with putting more gas in the tank. And this it's a huge deal for the F-35, right? So Israel's always been constrained for refueling for 2 reasons. One is military planners say, for a surprise attack like what Israel carried out last week, you don't want to refuel in a combat zone and in a war zone because that could tip off your enemy. It creates too many variables. It's not what you want to do when you're launching a sneak attack. The other issue would have been landing F-35 somewhere in Azerbaijan or in the Gulf states, but we know from our other reporting that Israel really wanted to avoid, at its neighbors' request, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, even Azerbaijan, getting involved in this conflict directly. So those bases, those Gulf bases, air bases that the U.S. maintains, were always going to be closed off to Israel. The issue of the F-35 modification, look, we knew this had been going on for some time, and the Israelis were working on a way to attach basically additional fuel tanks to the F-35s so that they could use up that fuel as they're going towards Iran, drop those tanks somewhere in the desert, and then go into what's called beast mode, which is the stealth mode for F-35s, and attack Iran directly, avoiding all radar. And it's from our sources, that's exactly what the Israelis have done. Aviation magazines and news sites were reporting as early as 2019 that the Israelis were working on this. There was a report in a magazine called Aviationist Magazine in 2021, 2020, that the Israelis were looking into ways, with U.S. help, to modify the F-35 in order to attach these kind of buddy tanks, what they're called, these drop fuel tanks onto the F-35. The problem the Israelis and American engineers face, because the F-35 is produced by Lockheed Martin, it's an American aircraft, is that the entire F-35 is coded in basically radar absorbent technology, so that you can kind of fly in, you can avoid enemy radar. And the sources that we spoke with wouldn't provide all the details, but it seems like the Israelis found a way to attach these buddy tanks on there that would be dropped after they're used up, and have them coated with radar absorbent technologies, and not disrupt the F-35 stealth capabilities. So it's a huge achievement, and it's one that's going to be watched by the Iranians, of course, but especially by the Russians and the Chinese in the future. Much like the war that we saw between the brief conflict we saw between India and Pakistan, how the Rafael performed and how all these fighter jets performed. This is going to be the same case. I mean, Russia and China are going to be watching this. So it's a huge strategic technological accomplishment for the Israelis and the Americans.
So the US appears to have provided the necessary technology for Israel's attack plan, but Israel is also highly dependent on the US for its air defenses. This centres around its notorious Iron Drone system, which has so far blocked a majority of Iran's missiles and drones. How long can Israel continue to restock its defences?
Yeah, look, Matilda, I think let's just step back, though, and explain to viewers what Israel's air defenses are, because I think there's still some confusion about this. Israel has a three-tiered air defense system. So short-range missiles and rockets that are fired are taken down by the Iron Dome. The next stage of like kind of broader mid-range ballistic missiles are taken out by a system called aerial sling. And then the third kind of highest tier level air defense system Israel has is the Arrow 2 and 3 interceptor system. And that's what's being used right now. So it's not the Iron Dome. The Iron Dome was really used intensely during the early stages of the conflict with Hamas, kind of shorter rockets that were being fired into Israel. This is the Arrow 2 and Arrow 3 system, which is being used. And our sources tell us that, yeah, the Israelis are running extremely low on this. And we know also that the Americans had to throw a lot of air defense systems into the theater of operations in the lead up to this attack, and currently are doing it now. So there's a THAAD battery stationed in Israel, at least one that we know about, which has been widely reported, a missile defense battery that the U.S. operates. There's also Patriot air defense systems in the region. Our U.S. officials that we've spoken to and other outlets have all reported that these air defense systems have been activated. And also, I think interestingly, the U.S. is also in the Eastern Mediterranean deployed battleships that are shooting down these missiles as well with Standard Missile 3 missile interceptors. So the SM missile interceptor is also being used. So the Americans have stepped up the last couple of days. They've helped the Israelis shoot down the Iranian ballistic missiles that are coming in. I think what's notable now is the last few days, the Iranian attacks in terms of the volume of ballistic missiles that are firing are decreasing. So one former U.S. official that I spoke with explained it to me this way, is that the Israelis are rushing to hit the Iranian trucks and transport vehicles that transport the ballistic missiles in order to take them out in Iran because they have a shortage of interceptors. So basically, in order to make up for this interceptor shortage, they're trying to hit as many missiles on the ground in Iran and as many of the vehicles transporting them as they can.
Thank you for explaining that distinction for us. Now let's talk about Iran and whether Iran can retaliate. We've just seen the US move an aircraft carrier from the South China Sea to the Middle East, flanked by a squadron of warships. The US appears to be moving to protect its own military bases in the region that could be vulnerable to targeting by Iran. Is this really an option for Iran?
I think it's the last option Iran wants to take. I mean, Iran, even at this stage, despite the heavy hits they're taking from the Israelis, they have refrained from hitting, first of all, energy infrastructure in the Gulf states and American military bases, because they know that that would give Trump the excuse to launch direct strikes on really high-value targets that the Israelis are not able to hit, like Fordow, the nuclear plant. So the Iranians are very, very hesitant to strike directly at the Americans. We know that. There was just a report actually saying that the U.S. had withdrawn, though, two bases in northeast Syria. So they closed down two bases today, it looks like. So the U.S. is also kind of, they're pulling troops out of this kind of crossfire. Um, and yeah, the Nimitz has been deployed from the Far East to the Middle East. I think that's a really important step. I mean, given the tensions with China, especially around Taiwan, the U.S. is not likely to pull out the aircraft carrier from from the Far East Asia, and send it to the Middle East unless it's very serious about potentially considering a direct strike on Iran. So, and also to be there to protect U.S. troops. But yeah, I mean, the Iranians, they really want to refrain from striking U.S. forces, and they are holding their fire. And also, those are easy targets, right? The bases in the Gulf, they're a lot closer than Israel. They're lightly defended compared to Israel. So if the Iranians wanted to strike those bases, they could probably do it despite the hits that they're taking, but they have held off on doing it. And that's because they don't want to drag the U.S. into this conflict that they're trying to avoid.
And finally, Israel has been lobbying US President Donald Trump to enter the war, primarily to help it target Iran's Fordo underground uranium enrichment plant. What is the significance of this site, and what would it actually mean if Trump agrees?
Yeah, I mean, well, look, I mean, this distinction that the Trump administration keeps trying to make that says we're backing Israel, but we're not in the war. I mean, U.S. officials that I speak with, even high-level defense officials, basically describe the U.S. at this level as a co-belligerent. I mean, it's pretty clear to everybody that the U.S. is, shooting down Iranian ballistic missiles to defend Israel. So that distinction about, whether the U.S. joins directly in strikes or not, I think it's becoming very thin. And even U.S. officials admit that the U.S. is a co-belligerent, right? So I don't think anyone's really kind of, taking this legal distinction that the Trump administration is trying to portray too seriously. But clearly the Iranians, they haven't struck the U.S. yet, and that's because the U.S. hasn't struck Iran directly yet. If the U.S. takes out, look, the Israelis want American help to take out Fordo, the plant, because they don't have the massive ordnance penetrator bombs that are needed. The U.S. has those bombs, and they have the B-2 stealth bombers to take out this plant. Again, it's up to it's still uncertain whether the Trump administration is going to make this decision or not. Arab Gulf officials that I was speaking with in recent days said that they felt it was more likely than not that the U.S. was going to come in. Before I came on the show, I just saw a social media post from Trump saying that we control the skies over Iran. I was texting a U.S. official before I came on the show just a minute ago asking what he felt that meant. And there are some people that feel that Trump is laying the groundwork for potential U.S. strikes, clearly taking ownership of what he says is this Israeli-American air superiority over Iran. So if the U.S. is going to come in, Trump is kind of signaling, or he's laying the groundwork for that.
Sean Matthews, thank you for joining us.
Thanks.